we have taken it outside, and it is a little bit breezy, so you're going to have to just sort of bear with us, but I wanted to take beautiful fresh herbs, put them on the grill with a little bit of salmon, and kind of give you an idea of what to make with the best of summer. Now, cooking with fresh herbs, and we've got here basil and this is pickling dill. I've also got some mint and oregano, and of course we've got parsley. And you know, there are several things that you need to think about when you're cooking with fresh herbs. Part of it is, most of these, of course, are what we would call the delicate herbs. And the delicate herbs are going to cook faster, they're actually going to burn a little bit faster, and maybe even get bitter when we think about heating them up. The tougher herbs, things like rosemary, even chive, will stand up a little bit more. So we're going to make a recipe that utilizes fresh herbs all throughout the cooking process. Some are used folded into a dressing, some are actually used in a black bead caviar, we're calling it, and then one is going to crust over the salmon and give it this great bright flavor. Because the thing about salmon is that it cooks in about the time that it takes for those herbs to be bright and beautiful and start to let out some of their oils. So there are a couple of things that I have to do. I have put my grill on medium-high heat. So we want to start to get that cooking. And then the other thing is, I also want to make sure that we've got all of our ingredients prepped and ready to go. So this, of course, is something that you can pick as you go. We're going to take some parsley for our black beans, and we'll get that out and ready, and then we're going to get started. So now today we're going to cook, of course, with Poire Arctic salmon, one of my very, very favorite fish. This is a fish that's sustainably raised. You can get it all throughout the country through Fulton Fish Market. It is a delicious, beautiful fish that's raised in the Arctic Circle. So we're going to use that along with some really beautiful fresh ingredients. So I've got some cucumber. I'm going to start off by making a little pickled cucumber. I've taken the seeds out of it and I've allowed it to come to room temperature. Now, I'm going to add some vinegar. And what you should know about vinegar, vinegar is the wine gone bad, which means that we want a delicious vinegar. This is a time when the flavors are really going to come out in it. We don't want to have a vinegar that's really bitter or a distilled vinegar that's not going to have a lot of flavor. This is from Sparrow Lane, which I happen to love, and it's a tarragon champagne vinegar made with champagne grapes. So you can see that I've just gotten them a little bit moist, and I'm going to put a little bit of salt over it. And this is just going to lightly brine while I'm making the rest of our dish. So we'll just set that aside. Now the next thing is, I'm also going to make a black bean caviar. And I want to show you the black beans, because these are an organic black bean that I have drained and rinsed, so it was a canned bean, but I've rinsed it very, very well. So you'll notice when you put it into a colander and you begin to rinse it, you want to rinse it until the foam dissipates. That way you'll actually be able to get all of that little bit of, I would say there's like a little bit of texture to it. There's a little bit of kind of almost like a softness to it that'll actually be brightened up by the time that you're ready to use it. So you can see I've got the black beans there. And then I'm going to add some other ingredients to this. Now, I've taken and I've diced an orange bell pepper, and I also have a red bell pepper and a yellow bell pepper, and then I have some red onion. And this red onion, if you're not really fond of the kind of almost acidification of a red onion, you can actually soak it in water. So soak it in ice water before you use it, and it'll actually make it sweeter. Now, the additional things I have for this salad are a little bit of cumin and some dried oregano. So here's one of those places where the dried herbs are really going to serve us. I'm just tossing this together. You can see we've got this really beautiful, colorful salad that we're putting together. Now the next thing is I'm going to add some parsley. And in this case, I want to have parsley that is So I'm going to pluck off the leaves. Now, if I was making a salsa, or like in the case of our dressing, and I were to blend this in the blender, you know what I could do is use the stems, because the stems are actually very, very sweet. And so there's no reason why you can't use them. Same with something like a cilantro if you want it. Daryl's pointing at the grill because he's worried because he hears my salmon cooking along. We've got to swap out. Don't worry. The salmon is fine. So now I'm going to take, and I want you to see this, because if I take my knife and I really force it over these fresh herbs, they will start to acidify, change color, meaning they'll get darker green, and they'll change flavor. So in this case, I've got a dry, meaning I've dried it off, herb. I've taken the stems out, and I'm just going to lightly chop it. So you can see how it's kept all of its beautiful color, and that means it's going to keep its sweetness as well. So let's get that in there. Let's get the cutting board wiped off. And then the last thing that we're going to put into this before we put a little bit of acid in it and the oil is some honey. And this is just going to bring out the brightness and the flavor in it. It's just enough to start to coat it. But oh my gosh, can you believe it? This is going to be such a pretty salad. Now, I'm going to take some lime juice. I had a friend actually who gave me this lime squeezer from a market in Mexico City. And so I'm just going to juice some lime halves. And I want to have this be really a bright, acidic black bean salad. It's going to go along with tomatoes and the lettuce greens. See in the inside there, it keeps it from getting the seeds in it. And then the last thing for this salad is a little bit of olive oil. Because even though the beans have a nice, bright flavor and they are a little bit creamy, we're going to need a little bit of oil over this. So now, like our cucumbers, this is one spot where we just let this set aside. It's going to get better in flavor. I think maybe I'll season it with a little bit of pepper. And I'm also going to put a little bit of salt on this. Now, my beans did not have salt in them, so I like to add the salt to things. So if I can, whether it's unsalted butter or if it's the beans themselves, you're much better off getting it unsalted. And then that way you're really in control of how much seasoning it has. So one part of this done, we're going to set it aside. We're actually going to build on this plate later. I want to show you the salmon now. Again, this is Quarry Arctic salmon, and what I have done is I've just gotten it with the pin bones out, and I also have the skin off. Now, our grill is getting nice and hot, and the way you know if a grill is hot enough is you put your hand over the grates and you count 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. When your hand, if you pull your hand off between 4 and 5, you know it's somewhere between 400 and 500 degrees, which means it's going to be ready for our fish. And the fish is nice and cold. So it's very important for you to know that we want a fish that is right out of the fridge. That's unlike other types of meats, meaning that you could have something like a steak or even chicken, and that would actually be something that you would, of course, the neighbors are now blowing their leaves, but we're going to keep on going. So we would have a protein like a meat or a chicken that would actually have to come to room temperature in order to cook through properly. Not fish. Fish is something where on the grill it needs to be nice and cold so that it doesn't end up sticking and so that it doesn't overcook. Now, I'm going to take this, and I'm also going to take some herbs, because in this case, this is one where you could pick fresh from your herb garden. Why not use a little bit of basil? I'm also going to use some mint. I mean, all of the components of like a chimichurri if you wanted to. I have some fresh thyme here, oregano, and I'll show you a little trick here with this. When you have a very tender stemmed herb, you can hold it at the top and you just gently pull the leaves off of the stem. Just gently pull it down. And then what I'm going to do is just give it a rough chop. So I don't have the stems in this. I'm just going to hold this together and I'm going to chop it very, very finely. Along with, I'm going to show you here, a little bit of crushed red herbs. And then the last thing is, and I've got some already done here, is I'm going to season it with salt and pepper. Now remember what we said, this is a very light, fresh herb crust. So it really works only on proteins that are actually going to cook relatively quickly. I'm going to roll this in the herbs, and I actually like to get every single part of this covered in the herbs itself. So covering it up there. And then I want to show you what I've got cooking over here. So I'm going to put this meat side down, meaning the top of the fish, and you could use the grill grates if you wanted, but in this case, I'm actually going to use this griddle that Weber has. I love this griddle because it gives me such a nice sear. And I've got some salmon that I've already done ahead, but we'll check on this and we'll see if this is ready even during the segment. So we'll put that over it, and we'll only turn this once. So the great thing about this fish is it's going to cook within about 2 to 3 minutes per side, and then all you have to do is turn it over. So you can see how with these, the herbs are still very, very bright in color, and I didn't have to do anything along the sides. The salmon actually cooked through perfectly while it was still browning. So super, super simple. Now, I'm going to get my cutting board cleaned up. Of course, any of these herbs that you would be working with, you could actually take from if you wanted, you could get them at the market. Make sure that you keep them in a glass filled with water. Get that out of our way here. So you want to keep them in a glass filled with water. They're very much like flowers. So we've talked about this before, where if they can continue to get a drink of water, they'll stay really bright, they'll stay very flavorful, and the sugar actually will come all the way up in them, and they'll continue to be delicious. You can't leave them in the fridge and expect them to continue to be flavorful. All right, I want to check on my salmon really quickly just to show you how easy it is to put together. This is my Weber BBQ, not like our friend Eric Gephardt's, where his, of course, is a big Kamado Joe. They do, I think, have a Kamado baby grill. But this one I love because I can pull it out. It's a gas grill. We can use it anytime, and we don't have to think about it, especially if you're cooking for just a few people, 3 or 4, you're not heating up an entire grill. And it just runs on a little gas canister, which I love. So, back to our herbs. Now, we need to put together a dressing for this. And this is a barbecue ranch dressing with fresh herbs. So here's where we're going to start. And I have to show you this. Don't you love this old school blender? This is my grandmother's blender from 1952. It's the original Waring blender. Isn't that amazing? All right, so here's what we're going to do with this. We're going to take buttermilk, classic dressing here. We're going to take yogurt. So I've got a little bit of plain whole milk yogurt. And then I'm going to add to it my favorite barbecue sauce. And this one is a barbecue sauce that I would say is closer to a South Carolina barbecue sauce rather than a Texas barbecue sauce. So it's a little tangier, it's got a little bit more acid. That way it's not going to be too sweet in this dressing. So it's totally up to you, but I like to use one that has a little bit more acid. Now, I've got a little bit of that tarragon white wine vinegar, garlic powder, and of course this recipe is all available on the blog. So you can go to quarryarctic.com to the blog. I gave you the link when we started. This is a little bit of paprika, cayenne pepper, our fresh chive. Boy, their yard's going to be super clean by the time we're all done with this segment, isn't it? And then I've also got some salt. And I'm going to do some pepper here. And I also want to check on this fish, because I think that this fish is just about done. So as quickly as we were talking about it, it comes together. Just a couple of minutes per side. You can take this and put it to the side. We don't want to get that overdone. We want it to be really beautiful, and we want it to be still a little bit moist and buttery. We don't want to cook that out of it. All right. So now we'll make as much noise as they're making next door. We're going to mix up our dressing. Works like a charm. And then what you'll want to do with this is just taste it to see if it's got all of the sweetness, the brightness that you were hoping for. It's so good. It's really delicious. All right, I'm going to put it in a little pitcher and serve it on the side of the salad that we're about ready to build. So, what we're going to do now is start to build our salad itself. Take all of these components and put it together. Get it cleaned up here just a little bit. Now I know that you're probably wondering, you know, with the herbs themselves, this is something where, again, we're taking these very delicate herbs, we're only just really lightly warming them. And if you were cooking with herbs like this, you would want to like pick and choose which herbs you would use depending on what type of dish. So for example, if you had a stew and you were going to really long cook the stew, you probably would want to use rosemary, something that's much stronger. Or you might choose to use dried herbs and then add your fresh herbs, things like parsley and all of that at the very end. So you don't want to overcook those herbs. You want to use them so that they're all as bright and as beautiful and as flavorful as possible. Now, I'm going to take a platter and I'm going to build this salad. And this is really all up to your own imagination at this point. I have some romaine lettuce along with some pea shoots, and I'm going to line the entire platter with this. I love to use the pea shoots because they have this, they really do almost give you like a pepperiness. You could use arugula if you wanted, but I like to use the pea shoots because they have such a toughness to them as compared to the romaine lettuce, which is actually going to be a little bit tender, more tender of a green. Now, I've also got some heirloom tomatoes, and what I did with these was I brought them to room temperature and then I salted them lightly. So I'm going to just make one big pile of those. So I'm going to put those on, and you can see how juicy they are. They're not seasoned with anything other than the salt. And when you bring them to room temperature, it's going to make them even that much more flavorful. Okay. So we've got that. And then I've got my cucumber. And the cucumber, of course, is just going to go right next to it. And you're just kind of piling this on. And we'll just set that aside. Come over here, girl. I'm going to move it. So you can see how beautiful this is. All of this color as we build it. And what's great about this is then everybody can just kind of pick and choose what they want. I'm going to add some of our black bean caviar. Again, getting all of that great brightness and flavor from that. And the more this gets a chance to marinate, the better. So if you want to make this ahead, that's perfectly fine, but you should bring it to room temperature before you serve it. And then we'll just put on our pieces of salmon, just 1 second, because we've got enough now to feed a crowd. And the nice thing about these, you can see just how pretty this is as it's coming together, is that it really does bring out all of those herbs. Now, here's the thing about herbs. We always have leftovers. You know, I mean, if you're growing it, great, but no matter what happens, it feels to me like there always end up being extra herbs. And this is one of those, I think, incredible opportunities. Herbs are filled with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. They can go into a salad. So you can actually tear this leftover basil and put it into a salad. I think that it would be really wonderful if you had like a salsa that was just made out of that, or to make a chimichurri or a pesto. All of these things that will build and make for a really bright, flavorful dish. So you can see we just have a little bit of fresh corn that I've taken off of the cob to finish this. And then our ranch dressing, which has those fresh herbs as well as the dried. Putting it all together. How are we doing for time, Darren?
22.
So the thing about this, I think, is that these herbs can give you a lot of versatility. They're not really one-dimensional. The herbs themselves, you can put into lots and lots of different types of dishes. And the key really is knowing what types of herbs, how they're used, and when. So in the case, remember, of these tender herbs, they're going to be bringing out flavors. They're going to cook more quickly. They're going to get bitter more quickly. In the case of the heartier herbs, those are going to maybe exponentially be able to be used about 50% longer over heat. And then if you're not sure, you still can use your dried herbs, and you can layer flavor. So the dried herbs are going to be much more pungent. The theory is that it's about 75% fresh herbs, 25% in terms of flavor that you would use to dried herbs. So you really get an exponential concentration of herbs and flavor all together when you use dried. And you miss that little sweetness, and you definitely miss all of the beauty and the color that comes along with it. So what we want to do is think about, how do we layer flavor? How do we put it together? This is something that is wonderful with salmon, because salmon naturally has all of these great kind of herbaceous notes in them, particularly when you're cooking with quarry Arctic salmon, where we've got mirepoix, all of that beautiful flavor of the water, the lemon, the brininess. This certainly would be a salad that I would probably serve with some extra wedges of lime, so that everyone could drizzle the lime on it the way that they would want to. I love to have a little bit of extra acid, so I would look to do that. And there you go. Using fresh herbs in a easy, simple way, but so versatile to make your dishes delicious and even that much more nutritious. What an incredible pairing with quarry Arctic salmon and fresh herbs here amidst the trees of Mill Valley. And thank you so much for putting up with all of our chaos. A little bit of wind today, a little bit of noise from the neighbors, but I think you'll agree, probably our picnic with this great quarry Arctic herb crusted salmon and a salad of black bean caviar and our barbecue ranch dressing, perfect summer dish.